The Chiefs are off and running. It's OTAs. They're in full effect. And now the whole team's out there, at least, well, most of the team. What's new and what's happening? What can we expect today? I'm Locked On Chiefs.
From the land of the free and the home of the Chiefs, this is the Locked On Chiefs podcast.
Welcome back, friends and neighbors. It's Matt Derrick from ChiefsDigest.com joining me today. We are going to go through all the observations at OTAs, not training camp. I just can't wait for August, evidently. We're going to get there, but what's going on? Who looks a little bit different? And who has to show us something today? We're going to get into all of that, but thanks for making us your first listen here on Locked On Chiefs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day for free on every platform, starting with YouTube and everywhere in the audio sphere. You can get it for free right now. Hit the like and the sub and the bell on YouTube if you would. I'm Ryan Tracy, the founder of Rogue Analytics and Performance Consulting, NFL33.com, and RGR Football. Mr. Matt Derrick, the man on the beat. You guys get to go out tomorrow, but there's been a couple of things going on out there right now. Some number changes, some guys looking a little bit different. What's like the number one thing that stood out to you so far as the first two sessions of OTAs are in the books?
Yeah, usually, we get out there for the first time. And remember, this is the first time during OTAs in this first week of the phase 3 is the first time that we really get to see the veterans back onto the field, after the offseason layoff. We've seen the rookies, their rookie minicamp, and they've been around for a little bit. But this is the first time to see the veterans. So, yeah, it is who has slimmed down, who has gained weight season, who's changing number season, getting it all. And so, yeah, really, that's the first thing I start looking for when our first day out there on Wednesday that I'll be looking to see is like, okay, who looks a little bit slimmer, who's packed on a few pounds, who's working off to the side and maybe had a little bit of off-season work, and, who's ahead of, schedule under recovery. Those are the things I like to look for during the beginning of OTAs.
That's what I'm looking forward to as well, especially once you get to see who's not at full speed, who's doing X, Y, or Z. A couple of small things. L'Jarius Sneed is out there, was available today. Didn't look like he was participating with a helmet on, so I don't know what the designation is there. Haven't gotten an update. Staying with the DBs, Chamari Connor's going to wear 27. With a helmet on, he looks like Rashad Fenton, so that should be an easy connection to make. Couple of number changes you guys will want to know about, and that is Josh Williams has gone to 2. That is a single digit. We have a change for Lucas Niang from 67 to 77. He's got the futuristic Darth Vader helmet going now too. So like kind of a whole concept change for Lucas Niang. We're going to talk about him in a little bit. But this is all like the juxtaposition of new players coming onto the roster. These are the first couple of days to get out there, break a little sweat. This isn't too rigorous, but it's about learning who everybody is. I didn't know Donovan Smith was going to wear 79. I didn't know that the players were going to change numbers, but like they're doing the same thing we are, right? Just trying to catch up.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and that's really what, especially the way the Chiefs are doing OTAs now, they've started to get back in the building over the last week or so. And so, they've been a chance to kind of, get the whole little, hey, good to see you again, what everybody's been up to and everything after doing virtual for the first couple of weeks of OTAs. So, they've got that chance, but with the way the Chiefs do things now, yeah, I mean, it's still a little bit of that, you're certainly still meeting people. Absolutely. The veterans and the rookies are still kind of meeting each other for the first time. There's going to be times you meet somebody for the first time out on the field. Especially for the offense and defensive guys. I mean, the first time you meet somebody might be when you line up across from them. So you see little handshakes and everything going back and forth and say, hey, nice to meet you, bud. That's what, to a big extent, OTAs are about. I mean, certainly it's about starting to install the offenses and the defenses. They get into the nuts and bolts of that already. Depth chart already is going to be starting to take some form. I mean, we'll have some questions absolutely for Andy Reid based on what we see in practice on Wednesday. So, there'll be a few little nuggets like that we're getting. But yeah, I mean, a big part of right now is shaking off the rust. And that's certainly what the first week of OTAs is about.
Yeah, you get up to speed, you do some walkthroughs, you're still doing some class work, like you're sitting with your position mates, especially. But I think as it all comes together, this is where it just starts to gel. And I know that this, for folks who don't know, Matt, like overall, for me, this whole period, and by session 2, I mean day 2 of this particular phase of OTAs. We know there's a lot of them. But for me, this is experimentation time. We don't exactly know how everything's going to line up. They're trying some things. We're going to talk about the offensive line here coming up in the next segment, and the wide receivers in particular in the segment after that, because there is a lot of experimentation at those two positions, but there are some others as well. I think this is as much for the coaching staff to experiment on their concepts as it is to just evaluate the new players in particular, but how the players are working together as a whole. Does that ring true for you, or is there less or more going on?
No, it does ring true. And, and the other thing, and I think certainly part of this is when you've got a veteran team like the Chiefs and first of all, a winning team, a Super Bowl champion team like the Chiefs, is that one, you don't have a lot of position battles. The Chiefs aren't like a lot of teams where there might be 6 different positions up for grabs. It's really not how the Chiefs are. I mean, if anything, there's only maybe a couple of places where you're thinking, okay, hey, is there a legitimate position battle here? Or is it more just jockeying for positions on the depth chart? I mean, by and large, that's where the Chiefs are. We're not going to be looking into this, I don't think, and saying, hey, there's 6 guys that just won starting jobs in training camp. That's not the way that this team's built. So right now, yeah, I mean, a lot of it is starting to do exactly those experimentations. You've got 13 practices between OTAs and the mandatory minicamp in June. And those 13 practices can tell you a lot about your team. And, where you see the most experimentation, especially, is on the defensive lines, the secondary, receivers. I mean, those are really where you see a lot of the experiments, because you want to see who plays well with each other, who may be better cast in a certain position. And that's why, Andy Heck likes to really rotate his offensive linemen to get them all experience at different positions. Because one, you never know when you might get pressed into service, like Joe Tooney, all of a sudden you get kicked out to left tackle. Be nice if you had a couple of reps there at some point that you could lean on. But also, it's just figuring out, which groups work the best. And no, they're not hitting. There's not, pads on right now. They're not colliding. But you still get a sense of that chemistry. You still get a sense of the timing and the footwork and everything that's involved, and, how you work together. And the coaches learn a lot about that. They learn a lot about the chemistry of the players this time of year. And increasingly, jobs are won and lost in these 13 practices. I mean, hey, training camp, it's not over with, but whoever does the best out of these 13 practices goes into camp as the starters and higher on the depth chart. And once you're there, it's hard to lose that unless you give it away.
I think that's where the key comes in. And so some guys have to make some changes in order to get there. We're going to talk about who stood out, especially in the bigger units, offensive, defensive line, some wide receiver talk right after this. But the playoffs are heating up, and y'all got to get in on it. Kudos to the Nuggets for what they were able to pull off. But if you do want to get in on it, I want you to go check it out and make sure that you're at FanDuel, because that's the number one place to get in the action, because right now they're giving you a no-sweat first bet. That means you create an account, make a first bet. If that bet doesn't win, you get up to $1,000 in bonus bets applied to your account that can help you bet again and come out a winner the second time. That's $1,000 in bonus bets available if your first bet doesn't win. There's no better place to get in all the action. NBA right now has the playoffs. There's a lot of sports coming around, and very, very soon we're going to be talking preseason games. So get into the action. It's at FanDuel.com/lockedon. You can see it down here below. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon for a no-sweat first bet. And you can get up to $1,000 in bonus bets if your first bet does not win. Check it out at FanDuel, the official sportsbook betting partner of the NBA, the MLB, and most importantly, the NFL. Now, Matt, I'm not betting on anything in OTAs because I just don't trust it. I got to tell you. Guys have to change their body types. They have to change who they play next to. They have to change their roles sometimes. Just from a couple of days, what stands out? Whose changes stand out to you the most?
Yeah, and really we're kind of going off some of the videos and the photos and everything that the Chiefs have shared thus far. And I tell you what, there's a couple of the offensive linemen that look a little bit different. Lucas Niang really stood out to me. Maybe it's the number change. 77 looks a little bit different too. But he looked like he slimmed down a little bit. I mean, and that was something that, I think that to play the style of the Chiefs offensive line, I think Lucas could stand to have trimmed down a little bit. So last year, I think he played a little bit heavier coming off the knee injury. I'm not sure where he weighed in last year during the season. I'd be kind of curious to talk to him if he has slimmed down a little bit, because it certainly looks like he has a little bit. And this is his first really action back, and probably the first time he's really felt anywhere close to 100% since that knee injury. Last year, he was ready to go. Certainly the Chiefs professed him medically ready, but there was no doubt. No one with Lucas around him really felt like he was 100%. Now he should be, and so now that he is, he's probably in a little bit better football shape too. And hey, this is the time of year for offensive linemen. This time of year you want to be slim because it's only going to go up from here.
Right. Yeah. There's no coasting at this point. I hope that translates to the field too. I'd like to see, honestly, a little bit more lower body musculature for him to recover from this particular injury. Folks, we know it was a left knee issue. I don't have the specific details because people are stingy about giving out information, but you can tell how that lines up. But lighter weight means that he can move his feet faster. So much as he's recovered from the injury itself, right? I think that plays into, much like the signing of Juwan Taylor and what we see from Wanya Morris being the draft pick, it all tells me, Matt, that it is drifting back towards the outside zone type-based offense again, that maybe this experiment with playing power might be a thing of the past, because I think what we see from this group of individuals that are at the tackle spots, they're more apt to play wide zone better than they are pinning and pulling and doing all the dirty stuff.
Yeah, and I think that they've even learned that a little bit about their interior guys too. That even though I think everybody would agree that Joe Thuney, Creed Humphrey, Trey Smith have got nasty streaks, all that they need, they're also athletic guys, and I think that the Chiefs were trying to live a little bit in both worlds, a little bit in the zone world and a little bit of, going gap when they needed to. And I'm not sure it ever really worked. I mean, when they tried to go that approach and everything like that and go with some man blocking, I'm not sure it was really ever a big success for them. So, their bread and butter is absolutely with zone runs. So I think you're probably are going to see them go a little bit more back to that because they do have a line that is built for it. And like I said, even the guys inside that, do have a little bit more physicality to them, they're athletic too. So there's no reason why they can't execute that kind of game plan. And hey, frankly, I think we've seen it. You get Trey Smith and Creed Humphrey out on the edges on some guys they can pick on. They're going to pick on them.
Yep. I'm happy for that. I look forward to it. Now, it's going to take a little getting used to. 74 is now your starter at right. That's Juwan Taylor. Donovan Smith appears to be wearing number 79. You can find him on the left-hand side. They're running with the ones, at least in the first couple of days. I'm interested to see if that changes up tomorrow, Matt, and maybe they give the vets a little bit of time off, get the younger guys in there. I guess it depends on how Lucas Niang is looking. But along with him, Protego Wanaga's wearing 76. That seems like it's just about right. I'm really interested to see Wanya Morris. He's probably the top guy that I'm looking forward to putting eyes on eventually. That all said, this should rotate, right? If we don't see any movement, is that a negative sign that the young guys just aren't ready?
It can be, especially this early. But, one thing about, Andy Reid and Andy Heck, especially on the offensive line, is that their philosophy has generally been, one, they want rookies to earn their jobs and to push for it. So seeing rookies playing a lot early is not common. When you do see rookies playing a lot early, it's an incredibly good sign because it tells you that they think that they're ready already. Creed Humphrey is a great example of that. Creed Humphrey came in as a starter day one of OTAs his rookie season, and there was a reason. I mean, he was ready to be that guy, and he was that guy. So seeing veterans holding down jobs right now doesn't surprise anybody. Because they do like to let the rookies compete for those jobs. And I mean, and Andy Reid applies that to the rest of the offense too, and the rest of the team. Steve Spagnuolo's maybe has a reputation for being that same way. But I've seen him, I think, alter quite a bit in the past, especially, with getting a younger and younger roster every single year. I've seen him mix and match the rookies and young guys a little bit more. Great example last year was with the corners. I mean, he let all of those guys rotate in there with the first team, and it wasn't, and they benefited from that. It wasn't just the one guy. It wasn't like Trent McDuffie. Here, you're gonna be with the ones. He let all of those guys get some reps in there, and that put them in good stead because all of those guys ended up being ready to play during the season. And so I fully expect that. Yeah, if you're not seeing a young guy getting a lot of reps with the first and the second team right now, that can be an indication that they're a little behind. But the more you see the young guys getting, and especially if they're getting a lot of looks early, that's usually a great sign for them.
I'm liking that as well. I just from observations, a couple here on the defensive side, DiCaprio Bootle, Jalen Watson rotating in particular, along with Joshua Williams. with Snead and Reed. So you got to think that that's obviously with the ones, get a good rotation there. Again, continuing that trend from last OTAs. Charles Menahue looks to be in fabulous shape from what I've seen. My only qualm is that I seem to see a number of things where he's dropping into space, which I'm not really digging right now. If he's in frame with Willie Gay, that's a problem for me. But, it's a starting point, right?
It absolutely is. And hey, you never know what they're working on that day, so sometimes context helps. But hey, we all know Steve Spagnuolo is going to ask his guys to drop back in coverage every once in a while. So get used to it.
All right, I will try. I want to talk about the pass catchers because there's 16,000 of them in this group. And I think that's a good thing. It's wearing more and more on me. We're going to get to that right after this. So, Matt, I can't even keep up with all the numbers. I'm not sure all the wide receivers have numbers assigned yet, so I'm not even going to go there. But I think a continuation of what we saw in April with Patrick Down in Texas, we saw a little bit of information from Sky Moore come out this week about some of the training they have been doing. I think there's plenty to go around about making some observations about who could this be. I'm really intrigued by what happens with the spot that Mike Burton and Sherm used to hold in. If they're not going to go with it, and I think if Andy was set on having a fullback on the roster, there'd be one on this roster that we know and love. I don't think it would be a couple of journeyman OTA tryout type guys. So my question to you is, given that there's a lot of talent, but again, projecting Kadarius Toney is still a projection. There's no true number one on this roster, in my opinion. Could they keep 7 because of this and just go with a bigger, deeper wide receiver core?
Entirely possible. I mean, when you think about, not carrying a fullback, it does factor into, where do you think that position could go? I mean, the Chiefs have, they've carried 6 wide receivers at times last year, a lot of the season last year. And, with the practice squad really have been able to extend it almost to 7 or 8, it feels like. It brings up the question about how many tight ends. I mean, Chiefs, you would think at this point are absolutely going to carry 4 tight ends, barring any injuries. So 4, 6, okay, now how many running backs? Are you going to carry maybe an extra running back if you're not going to carry a fullback? Is that 3 or 4 running backs that you're carrying now? That's where it impacts the most. And I mean, I definitely think it's a player on the offensive side. I don't think you're dropping a fullback because you want to carry an extra linebacker or an extra corner. I mean, that might end up being how it shakes out on some weeks, depending on the flow of the roster. But no, I mean, I do think you're talking about keeping an extra offensive player. And frankly, with the Chiefs, and the way that they're structured, I could absolutely make the case for maybe keeping 7 wide receivers to start the season. I mean, there's going to be a tough battle. I mean, like I said, this is not necessarily a battle at the top. I mean, I think you kind of know who the top receivers are going to be, who or at least the first 3 or 4 that are going to make this roster. It's the 5, 6, and then 7, 8, depending on how far you go and how before you get to the practice squad. All those guys are going to play. I mean, the Chiefs are going to have 8 or 9 receivers from this group that probably make the roster and the practice squad and are going to see snaps this year. And it's that group beyond the first really 3 or 4 that it could go either way. I mean, you could see a guy that may be number 12 right now on the roster, maybe fights their way all the way up to number 5. I mean, that's how competitive it's going to be. And I'm not sure that there's any clear-cut favorites at this point. I mean, obviously, guys who can play special teams and I was intrigued to certainly see Richie James. Looks like he was maybe getting some return opportunities. That's going to be a place where some people can make their mark too. So we'll see, but I'm definitely interested in this wide receiver group and see how it all shakes out, because right now it's about who can develop the chemistry with Mahomes the fastest and pick up the offense.
I think from what we've seen in the offseason and clearly what we know has gone on in the past, MVS, Kadarius Toney are going to be mainstays. I think we're all comfortable with that. My intriguing takeaway from what I see from the wide receivers early in these couple of OTA sessions is that Sky Moore has graduated. He's getting like specific attention from Andy Reid in this offense. And for me, that's a delineation point. It's one thing if you're getting, as a second-year player, coached up by your position coach. Do they have an assistant wide receivers right now? I don't think that they do.
I'm trying to remember off the top of my head. I can't remember that they do. I can look it up real quick. But
well, you probably know better than I do, whether you're looking or not. But that's one kind of attention. That's one kind of development. When you're getting the head coach, play caller, play designer, going one-on-one with, this is how you're going to attack X, Y, or Z, that tells me there's a bigger investment in the offense for that particular player. Because I don't see that from Andy Reid every training camp practice. You obviously are at more practice than I am, especially in the OTA session. Am I making a mountain out of a molehill here?
No, I don't think you are. I mean, and let's be honest, there is a lot on Sky Moore this year. I mean, this is the year that he is expected to make a big jump. And part of that is that, he's got to be able to do what the Chiefs ask of their receivers, which is to play multiple roles. It's not just to have your part of the package of the playbook. You got to be able to understand all 400 odd pages of it. I mean, you've got to be able to understand all three positions. So, whereas last year, Sky Moore might have been limited down to, say, a couple of hundred options in that playbook. Now he's going to have like 1,200 that he needs to know and understand. And that's just, it's the reality playing the Chiefs offense. I mean, that's how it has to go. And as a rookie, they absolutely limited the workflow a little bit. I mean, they put more and more on him as the season went on because they felt like he could handle it. But now, it's definitely going to be fire hose time because they're going to be asking, Sky Moore to be doing the things that he wasn't doing last year. And that is going to be a little bit of attention sometimes from the big guys. I mean, there's going to be times that Andy Reid, and this time of year, this is really the only time you get a chance to teach in the NFL. This time of year is it, because once you get to training camp and especially into the season, you're not in teach mode. You're in coach mode at that point. You're about just getting everything done and making sure everything is fine tuned. This is the time of year where you can have that instruction, where you can take a player off to the side and say, hey, you know what? This is what you need to do in these situations. And, and Andy Reid, certainly he sees something on the field. He will take one of his offensive guys aside and say, hey, here's what you're doing good. Here's where you need to work. He absolutely gives them that advice. And frankly, there is nothing bad in my mind when Andy Reid gives you some attention, because who the guys who he ignores? The guys who don't deserve attention.
Right. That's the way that it goes at this level. I'm looking forward to see who gets that and what it looks like tomorrow, folks. Make sure you stay with us because we're here 5 days a week. We'll have Matt back next week. There's going to be a number of practices between now and then, so things can change, and they most certainly will. We'll talk about the veterans that maybe we're not seeing out there yet and what we're going to expect. So please make sure you like, sub, hit the bell here on Locked On Chiefs. Check out another Locked On show for your next listen. You everydayers, we're calling them locos, Matt. They named themselves through the Twitterverse. That's Locked On Chiefs official subscribers. So for all of you locos, yeah, right, it works perfect. For all you locos out there, we'll be back tomorrow. We're going to start looking at top 5 positional things around this roster and who can be that. Chris and I will break it down tomorrow. Make sure you're liking subs so that you see all of that. Thanks for spending your time with us today. Matt, thanks for your time.
Hey, and I'll make sure I got some good nuggets for you next week and from practice that I can share with all of you.
Well, I like nuggets. Thank you for that. And thank you guys for listening. We'll talk to you tomorrow.